trying to get teachers to think about how to integrate engineering education concepts, especially the EDP, the engineering design process, with kindergarten students. And we have been very successful. We have a couple of grants, and so we thought we would share some of the ways that we were able to catch the reviewers' attention. Especially recently, in January, I participated in a panel review, and there was a number of us a number of different panels, and they brought us together, right, to go over what we were seeing in the proposals. And everybody was saying the same thing. They were not very innovative, and they were not addressing the broader impacts statements. In other panels, it's sort of like, well, they wanted to fund everything, but the broader impact statements were underdeveloped, and the ones that get funded are the ones that have really good broader impact statements. So I know you guys are going to write really good innovative proposals, so you really need to pay attention to that broader impact statement. Don't wait till the end and just throw it in there, because the reviewers really do recognize that.
The science aspect of it?
We're going to try to do both. She's going to address it in terms of the work that she's done. Most of my work has been in education, so I don't want to seem like I am an expert in, but some of the examples do, they go into microbiology and genetics, so I'm hoping that helps you a little bit. All right, so today what we're going to do is you have a set of broader impact statements, and what I want you to do, and you can do this with a partner if you want, or individually, if you could sort them from strongest to weakest, or weakest to strongest, and then we're going to talk about it. So I'll give you a couple minutes to sort. me another minute? Yes. When you are ready, if you want to write the order that you decided on over here, that would be great.
Strong to weak, weak to strong.
Week to start.
Mine is these two, two.
Just put the statement number.
Yeah, 2, 1. 2, 1. Yeah, that's what it is.
Okay.
You are right, nothing else. I go to these NSF panels, but my weakness is guarding back, so Michelle knows, that's why nothing jumps.
Good. We're gonna talk about why. And we're going from weakest to strongest, right? Yes. Yes, strong. Okay, so it looks like most of you agreed that 1 was the weakest. What are some characteristics of that 1? Why did you score it so low?
That has nothing to do with research.
Nothing to do.
Nothing to do with the research. There isn't a statement kind of summarizing, bringing what you're doing in the research with the broader impact. Okay, good. That's good. Something that you should start with. What else?
So upon we shoot this, the broader impact, we should state what research is or not in the review statement.
Okay, there's a difference between broader impacts and intellectual merit, right? While you should summarize the points of the research that you're going to bring into the broader impacts, it's not the same thing as intellectual merit. So if you focus too much on the research, it's going to be, the panelists should say, well, this is mostly intellectual merit, not broader impacts. And I've been guilty of that, right? I think the first couple of NSF proposals I wrote, you know, I got some comments. They weren't this specific. I'm like, what do you mean? This is like really great work, you know? And then I realized, oh, okay, they're really looking for something a little bit different. I was just so used to thinking my work was just so great, right? That I couldn't, I had to learn how to talk about it in a different way. Okay, so what were some of these characteristics? Looks like 4 got the most hits on the bottom one. Right, so what are some of the characteristics for the 4? Other than being the longest, why is it the longest?
That's the only thing that talked about your students, high school students, K-12.
So they mentioned the audience, very good, that's a criteria you should be looking for. What else?
There was a variety of audiences, it wasn't just one.
There's that could be a weakness, which is probably why we saw it back and forth, right? So if there's a variety, the reviewer's gonna think, well, who is it? The students, the teachers, broader community? What is it gonna be? So you wanna be very explicit about who your target audiences are. What else?
They talk about the alumni, so we're going to bring them into the system, but then also continue to help them develop the project and come back.
Okay, so there's a little bit of sustainability there. That's good. What else? Anything else? Okay, well, we're going to look at some other things. So we're going to look at, we're going to remind you what the themes are. So the review panelists are given a set of themes to look for in those broader impact statements. And I'm going to be going over 5 steps that you should be going as you're working on your NSF proposal to guarantee that you have a really strong broader impact statement, because it really should be an outgrowth of the research that you're doing, okay, not an after that. And we're going to be throughout looking at some sample statements and revising as we're going through each step. And so the goals are, at the end of this session, I'm hoping that you'll have better developed skills in broader impact statements, as well as how to use your plan to achieve the broader impact. So these are the themes that NSF has put out, right? It needs to advance discovery while promoting teaching, training, and learning. Then this is especially true for the more scientifically based ones, right? So you're advancing discovery while promoting teaching, learning, and training. Another important one is broadening participation of underrepresented groups, right? But be careful. A common thing that came up in the panel that I was recently with, trying to, the gender, right? So they were trying to bring in more women into engineering. And what was happening was they were playing into the stereotype anyway, right? So, and there was this one great program that focused on design of fashion, right? But some of the reviewers were really offended by that. Female engineers said, you know what? They're basically still maintaining that this is engineering, and they're trying to push women in there as opposed to broadening the concept of engineering. Okay. So you do want to do that. Be careful. Have somebody take a look at it to make sure you're not reinforcing some stereotypes there. And then you want to broadly disseminate results to enhance understanding. That's another target. And usually everybody says that that's what they're going to do. So you have to really think about the resources that you have, because everybody puts that in, but we all know, oh, you know what? They're saying this, but there's nothing in their plan or in the budget that is going to allow them to do this. Okay, and then provide benefits to society, right? Is something that both in terms of the science and in terms of who you're training as well. Okay, so this is sort of the guidelines that is provided by NSF. So you want to have well-written broader impact sections. Should include activities that are clearly described. Some of these examples don't describe those activities very well. They're too general. You want to be a little bit more specific. You have to include a rationale. And if you're including any kind of training or education, then you need to base it on the literature. Okay? And if you don't know that literature, you need to put somebody on your team that knows the literature, so that the panel can say, yes, they're well-resourced and have a background to do this. And again, this is the hardest one because this one is going to be based on what you know about your own area, is the creativity, originality. And one of the things that I saw in proposals that I just, in terms of the education ones, everybody was basically doing the same thing. The thing that's always been done, and so nobody was impressed by that. So you want to at least present it in a different way. And so, and again, it should be always established, have a basis in an established approach. So what you might think about doing is what, if you want to expand something that's currently doing, think about how you could do that creatively, right? Because I think that was a weakness in a lot of the proposals. They wanted to expand, but they weren't thinking, thinking outside the box, essentially, right? And so it was really hard. We didn't see anything that stood out, and that makes the job of selecting which ones are going to get funded harder, right? So, you want yours to stand out. The proposer should have a well-organized strategy for accomplishing the clearly stated goals. So you want to, now it's not going to be very extensive, but you want to make sure that you allude to your program plan, right? So summarize the parts of your plan that's going to help you achieve the broader impacts. So you have to be thinking, as you're working through your project plan, how this is going to be accomplished along the way. You want to establish the qualifications of those responsible. Again, so if you're doing something in education, you want to make sure you have somebody on your team. Doesn't have to be a PI, but somebody who maybe the evaluator, maybe a consultant, right, that's going to help you with that. And then demonstrate sufficient resources for the support. Really innovative stuff, really broader impact activities that really work cost money. So if you don't mention it at all in your budget, that's a flag, okay? All right, so here's the overview of the steps. First, think about your audience. Who's going to be the recipients of that broader impact, right? Is it teachers, parents, other scientists, government, industry? Who is that? And then before you go to activities, you have to decide what percentage of the overall budget am I going to dedicate to this? 2%, 3%, depends on how large your grant is going to be. Because once you have an idea about budget, then, I do it the opposite way. I plan big and then tone down. So you could do that too. But budget is always, it should be among the first things that you look at. And then, right, and the stuff now is all about interdisciplinary partnerships, collaboration, partnerships. Nobody can do everything by themselves, right? So if you are saying that you're going to disseminate this widely, you have to have collaboration with networks that'll help you disseminate that, right? And get a letter from them saying, yeah, we're going to help them disseminate this to our network that, is their part of their target group.
Zenaida, do you want to give examples of partners?
Could be museums. It could be the different departments in your university, right? It could be community groups. It could be industry, right?
Yeah.
So
It could be classrooms, like.
So yeah, it wasn't in the NSF grant I have under review now. A company came to me, right, because it was about literacy. A company came to me and they said, we want a partnership. We really don't know. We've never done this before. And I thought that's perfect because I'm working on a literacy project. I need books, right? And once we develop the materials, I need somebody who can disseminate it widely. So those kind of things. If you have connections, or start making those connections so that you can bring them in when you are ready to write. And then of course, the project description. Once you have those laid out, then you're ready to start drafting your project description. I'm going to go over what is included in each. And then again, allude to that evaluation plan. So as you're working through your evaluation plan, think about, okay, when is the earliest point where I can try to start implementing my broader implement, and then what do I need to do to collect evidence to the funder that I am actually creating an impact. So it's not just about, I'm going to write all of these great papers, right?
How much weightage you give towards the intellectual aspect. When I evaluated many months ago, they used the broader impact was just surfacing. So panelists like me were art bent on science didn't bother much, but nowadays I was told that that's weightage. Is it 50-50? These are kind of
They tell us 50-50s. I don't see that actually works out. Definitely the science
Yes,
and
sir.
what you're doing, I think, is, I can only speak for the last panel that I participated in. And then, because we want to see, are they doing good work? Is it innovative? Okay, so now what are they doing to make sure that this gets to a broad audience?
But still you sell on your science.
Yes. You get their attention with the science, and then, but if you don't have that broader impact statement, because we did turn down a couple of them because it was not fleshed out at all. So you want to make sure you have it fleshed out. And if you want to, if you happen to be in, if your proposal happens to be on a stack of really good science proposals, right? Most of them are not going to have broader impact. Good, so that you're going to make yourself stand out by also having a really good broader impact statement. Okay, so one, determining the audience. Again, these are the different audiences that NSF says are appropriate. Government, teachers, students, industry, the general public, underrepresented groups. Okay. Did you want to talk at all about how you do it with some of your relationships?
This is exactly, my partners too, if I was, writing the science one. The only thing I'd add is that we're fortunate to have someone from the museum, the Texas Tech Museum here. And so another very feasible partner could simply be within our own resources here at the museum. And she was just talking about a PI whose broader impact targeted an exhibit at the museum. And so, do you want to say just a few words about that, just as an
If you have
example?
time right now, I'd be delighted.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm Nikki Ladkin. I'm the Assistant Director for Academic Engagement at the museum. And the museum's doing two things right now. One of which is renovating a gallery space that will be specifically designed to showcase the breadth of excellent research that's going on at Texas Tech. So that's something that will be happening regardless of NSF proposals and broader impacts and so on and so forth. But it will be a blend of science and humanities and how those interact with the arts. So STEM, STEAM, curriculum development and so on and so forth. The working title for it is Leonardo's Kitchen, where there's always something going on in the kitchen is the sort of the tag phrase which hopefully will appeal to a broader audience. Specifically, Dr. Brian Ansell, he's an atmospheric scientist in geosciences. He came to the museum a couple of years ago to discuss whether or not the museum would be his partner in producing an exhibit about the weather that he was going to submit to the NSF for a career development grant. And it was perfect. He started right at the beginning. He did everything he should have done. He worked with the museum. We were able to help him craft his broader impact statement based on some of the specialities that we have and know about K through 12 education. And ultimately his proposal was funded and his exhibit opens April 1st. And it's called How the Weather Works, Our Place Between Sun and the Storm. And so he translated a fairly heavily scientific research endeavour into something that's got whiz and bang and interactives and all sorts of fun stuff that's going to be happening. So come April 1st, if you're interested in that, you'll be able to come over to the museum and take a look at that as an example of that kind of community collaboration. And so if you have any interest in that whatsoever, please do let us know at the museum. We'd be really, really pleased to talk with you and to discuss any possibilities. So really thank you sincerely for the time.
Sure,
I appreciate it.
I just handed out more examples. There's a list of different ways that you could do that as well. So why is it? So you also want to allude to why it's important to work with that audience, right? And this is where you can really connect it to the research that you're doing. Okay, but these are some for teachers and students. These are some reasons why it's good to foster a scientifically literate population, enhance future workforce, increase the ability to solve future challenges, and of course, increase America's global competitiveness. And then you want to end that part of the statement with how you will deliver your message. Okay. All right. So I have some statements here that have some categories on the side. I've labeled different parts that I would expect. Not all of them have it, but right now what I want you to do is just for one of the they represent different disciplines. So look through that, just that first part to see whether you want to develop one that is closer to what you do, right? And so what I want you to do is identify one to read that part of the statement that includes the audience, where they identify some of these. At least one actually doesn't include the audience, so read the other parts and then add that audience piece to it, okay? And then for those of you who are brave enough to share, you can write it up and we'll discuss your revised audience. So just be a sentence or two, it doesn't need to be big. That's what I want you to do is make it better. How you rewrite it to make it better. If you rewrite it, or put it on the document. Actually, a better idea was if you rewrite it on the back of the sheet, then you can put it under the document camera so that it's easier to see. It's gonna be better than it was, for sure.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
There are some people who understand the rationale. Is exactly the rationale.
The rationale, why is it important to target this audience? That's the rationale.
Not how.
Not how, not yet. You need to know, you know, we wanna know why that's important. Because the how would be the activities, separate section. Tell if you want.
I like the second one.
All right, so will you read to us in case anybody had trouble reading already?
So, I think at first I didn't really understand the assignment. I thought I had to fill in the activities,
Oh,
but then I realized, yeah, you just don't guys. So then I looked back at the choices we had, so kind of the overall, we have industry, because they're gonna work with the Center of Ocean Science.
Center for Ocean Science Education.
Yeah, and education. So I thought that was industry, that's not really government, so that's an industry. But then we have students, and they're very, very specific, which I thought would be a detriment, because it's only 12th grade. I understand why it can't just be high school or whatever. And then there's government, because there's NASA Glow. So then we have the 12th grade students and 12th grade teachers between students.
That's why it's important to include the rationale. So if you're gonna limit it to just 12th grade science, then why is this group particularly important just to target?
But one thing I find is, it's just basically selling. I used to evaluate it, they say you sell on your proposal. It looks like you are a university academic. So even though you're trying to target the high school or whatever, your core entity, customer is still the students, right? Whether you teach, don't you think that should be there? Otherwise you are jumping from one end to the other.
It depends on the project. Some are really interested in working with industry, because if the university is creating these innovations and industry is lagging in terms of making changes, right? Then I could see a proposal that would have a really good rationale for working with industry.
Because then that goes to translational science, that may not be for people in career. You see, the way how you fine tune your proposal matters. Michelle knows this a lot. Then it becomes a commodity. If you are targeting an industry, I sat last year on a panel, then a couple of senior people said, if he is targeting industry and it's so great, why is he not going to industry to get funding? So it can backfire that way too, don't you think so? So you got to be careful how you.
That's a good point. So you should have postdocs, right? And then you could bring them in. Something like
Because I sat on that and good, it was good. Then this is a good idea. He's trying to target his industry and government regulators. Then they can fund you. Why are you coming to MSR? All 6 months of his work gone waste. Some said, okay, if this industry is going to jump in joy with this, it's easy for us, just push it through.
But in terms of the guidelines, they have that on their list as a potential
They have,
audience, and so I mean, there's two issues there too. I think that's a good point, and so if you're worried, and you can figure out a way to
The
do
way you
that,
write it.
that's great. If you have a really good reason for maintaining that connection just to the industry, I think you can make a case, refer back to the guidelines. Right, and it really is dependent on the panel. So if you guys all participate in panels, you can raise this issue, saying, "Hey, wait a minute," right?
Yeah.
And saying they have these other points, they meet the criteria. Let's not put them on the no list just because they're addressing.
Yes, the reason I said it was a career panel, and this career panel is documented towards how you progress your academic thing. Then he or she is bringing an industry component. It's good, but it should not be heavily weighted towards my contacts with the industry. So on and so forth.
I think it's depending on what
On
the
the type of
problem,
the
the problem, right?
And the rationale, it goes back to what you were arguing about, keeping that rationale very strong and justifiable. So if the key to that industry participation is creating sort of a a pathway for students upon graduation to have exposure to career opportunities, and specifically this company that might have a diverse need for engineers, then that would be like a really strong argument for pulling in that.
Yeah, and I bet that statement didn't make that argument.
See, people
So that's
don't,
why
they just
a
leave
panelist would
the
have
broader
said.
impact at the last minute, so
Right.
it didn't come, but your point
Right.
comes to the surface, right? So
Right.
people have to spend really time doing
Yes.
it, that's what I'm.
And I also think it's real important to reach beyond our arena of the undergraduate and even our graduate students, because that is the intellectual merit. I mean, the students who are working on all of the remainder of the NSF project are your undergraduate researchers or your graduate researchers. And so to target an audience that goes beyond that is
Sure,
really
very
the
much.
broader participation that I think that they hope for. So whether it be K through 12 or whether it be an informal audience like at a science spectrum or the museum, I mean, think about creatively extending the work that you're doing from this higher level education environment to some other environment, because that is hugely broad, right? That's impactful.
If industry, is an audience somehow get involved, does it help your case to show that they may be willing to put in some resources?
Absolutely. But you have to be careful, right, how you word it, because some NSF funds don't allow, if it's considered
Applied to-
cost share, right? So you have to be careful about how you phrase it, and then look at the specifics of the particular proposal that you're responding to, right? Because if it's viewed as cost sharing and it prohibits cost sharing, then it's not gonna work. It might not even get reviewed because somebody ahead of the review will identify that as an issue, right?
So they write letters of collaboration, that they will participate in this way, and there's really not a lot of mention of exchange of dollars, but in-kind collaboration is completely acceptable.
So the student goes for a summer internship or something
Right.
and pays the student, that's fine.
Right. I've done that before, and they followed up, the program manager followed up and wanted to know what student went where. So, I mean, it's in that proposal, we're gonna follow up on it.
I have a question. The audience is not the same as collaborators.
No, not always the
I
same.
think I can take this one as a template for the program, right? But let's do exactly the audience.
The audience should be the first thing you identify, right?
Bold.
We're gonna make an impact, you can bold it if you want. We're gonna impact this group, right? Don't have too much bolding, you know. So now that you have your audience identified, you wanna see how much of your budget. So I always do the budget first, right? That's gonna tell me where I can skim if I need to skim, where do I put my resources. I think about what are the most important things, the non-negotiables. I have to spend this money on this because, it's really important. And so some of the factors that you should consider, maybe it's a small grant that you're doing, it's 300,000, and you really are building off of something that is already there. Maybe it doesn't require it. You want to make sure you describe that, right? So, decide whether full funding for it is required. In-kind funding only if it's allowed, and then leveraging. You always want to see some leveraging, right? So if you have some background, if you have a little bit of work done on this, you want to emphasize it. If the university has a way to help you with this, right? They're not expected to receive funds, and then you can talk about that. Okay, we won't skip that one. And then, so then you select your activities. Right? It should be grounded in the literature. Okay, so you need to get somebody on your team that's going to help you that if you're not well versed on that part.
What do you mean by that?
If it's an education, broader impacts, you want to write it so that you know what the literature says is going to make a difference, right? So even now, because you know we've done this for lots of years, I'm going to create all these modules and we're going to disseminate it. Well, that's been done. What do you know about how your approach to that module is going to be effective versus other approaches, right? So you're going to want to write it at some point before the broader impacts, and then what you want to do is emphasize it. Remind the reader, look, I mentioned this up there, and this is why it's going to be impactful, right?
As a rule of thumb, consider 10 of your references associated with a proof that mentoring, for example, if you're going to do a mentor program, proof that shows that the mentor and the mentee both gain something from the experience. Because there's a lot of literature that in education that assesses the impact of different education strategies. And if you show the reader that you've done your homework, and one of the rationales for developing a mentoring program is because of these citations in the literature that prove that this kind of method is effective for first graders. I mean, it just randomly taking examples, but that literature is very important because those reviewers want to know that you've looked at education literature and have some credibility behind that rationale associated with the literature.
And you also just don't want to list a set of activities. You have to describe them in some way, right? So you could say, mentoring that has these 3 features is what's going to create my impact because I know that this person says it works, this person says it works, and that's literature.
So
And
does the references actually go into the broader impact statement?
Not in the summary that is like in the abstract. No, it would go in the broader impact section of the proposal, like where you explain.
Because now it's required to have its own little section. So in that section,
You have a lot of validity behind your rationale and your methods, and it's established in published literature. Then you have a really strong broader impact section.
So
But
this,
then does it not go against the proposal, Michelle, that these people have used the techniques, but they're only using it, but it's like doing in a lab and doing in a cow or whatever it is, that they are using the same technique, but they are trying to put their science using the established that.
yes, that's a really great rationale. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's only been done over here. I want to bring that approach over here. Right?
And the assessments, that was new to me when I was learning about education. Not just that you're implementing this mentor program, but you're going to evaluate if it's effective. And so there's a whole other body of literature.
That's later. You're getting
Okay,
there.
sorry.
We'll talk about it. Okay. So you want to involve, okay, so these are the types of experts or people you want on your team that'll help you with this, right? So you have to have the step, if there's an established program at Tech, right, where that you can use to implement some of your activities, say that. And bring them on board. Individuals who specialize in education or mass communication, if you're saying, we want to make these modules and materials available because you've already established teachers don't have it and they want it, right? So how are you going to get it out there? And then, so you would want mass communication experts as well as organizations if teachers are your target group that have their attention. And because, lots of stuff gets thrown at them all the time. So if you can show you have a collaboration with the network, it's really good. The teachers really read, right? Then you're going to have a much stronger case for a broad impact. We don't have that much time. I had wanted it to be more interactive, so I'm going to skip over the practice one. Well, why don't you look through the set? Which one has the best activities developed? Sample 1, sample 2, or sample 2 we know because I didn't even describe the activities. Don't make that mistake, right?
sample 1.
Right. But this one is still was criticized for not fleshing out some of the things. So make sure that all of your activities, right, are well organized and correspond to one another. So how do they lead into each other?
But this is just the statement, right? This is just the beginning, so you bring it up later in your proposal, so isn't this just supposed to be like an executive summary of what you do?
No, this is the broader impact statement that goes into the proposal.
So it should
Right.
be, so.
In your abstract, you have to include a whole bunch of other stuff. You're only gonna have a few lines on that abstract
It's
statement.
So then the references should be,
Yes, in the section in the proposal, which is, I think it's in the third section. It depends on which program you're in.
Does that answer your question?
But then,
In the
Yeah.
proposal.
yeah.
here, this is like a paragraph verbiage too much, but this is activities of bullet. Which do you think would
If this person had a better rationale and collaboration, that might be okay. Because then you could put the citations next to the bullet. That might be okay.
It's
I think that would be a lot better than what I've seen, right?
There's
So,
too much reading to do here, but it's just bullet points, like goal and objectives.
in the last panel review, there weren't anything with bullets in the ones I reviewed. So it's your preference. I would stay away from bullets, but
Okay.
doesn't mean it can't work. Right.
Because in objectives and goal, they said objectives have to be bulleted, goal can be also like.
Yeah, because I think if you have a strong rationale and evaluation, right, I think that's where you want to put your text. If you're going to weight it, you have a page to write your broader impact statement, you're going to want half of it to be dedicated to your rationale and your evaluation. But you know what, I shouldn't be that general. It's going to depend on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to do activities that are really innovative, you might want to spend more time describing those activities. Okay. So project description. You want to spend some time thinking about what success looks like, and then how would you demonstrate success of broader impacts. And there's some things that you need to think about when you do that. They should be specific, right? So you should have observable outcomes. Shouldn't be, everybody's going to feel good, right, after the experience. How do you know? You have to have an observable outcome. They should be measurable. Panels like quantifiable stuff, right? There were some qualitative things, and we always had a longer discussion. So if you can make them quantifiable, make them quantifiable.
Just a quick question, this has to be done by the PI or the evaluator?
Both.
Both.
Both. Right. Audience-based, right? Don't describe it that sometimes that happens, right? They describe the broader impact, but we're like, wait a minute. If their target audience is teachers and they're only talking about student activities, sometimes there's a mismatch. So make sure you don't have a mismatch. It's clearly aligned with or correspond to your audience. And then that it's relevant, which is meaningful and realistic. Yes, you can shoot big, but the panel will know if it's not realistic. So you want to make sure you write it in a way that, especially if you have a good team, right, and you have that evaluation piece, it's going to seem more realistic. Okay, so all of these pieces are really important. Time bound, right? Immediately after the training, 3 months after the training, when are you going to see that impact, right? All right, here's some examples. So for something specific, incorporate educational materials on aquatic invasive species. Measurable, you can go percentages. Percentage of participants will have increased awareness of X, whatever you're measuring. Or you can go numbers, 500 unique users to the website every month. So you need to put that in your budget because you're going to have hire a webmaster that includes that, right? Collect that information. But then you would want that to be time bound, right? So you would say, once you launch it, you give it a few months for it to, your networks to make everybody known, right? Aware of your website, then that's when you will start collecting them. So your audience, workshop participants, or community members, and then an example of relevance. If there's any way you have any information on needs assessment, that's how you can show evidence that it's relevant, right? Your audience says they need this, so I'm giving it to them, right? And that could be, if you don't have needs assessment, it could be based on the literature as well. And then I mentioned the timeliness. So at the conclusion of the workshop, 3 months after receiving the outreach materials, etc.
So this is new to me. So these days, you have to show how your impact things gets evaluated in the outcome.
Yeah, they're making us look through these more and more.
That's a sub-project in itself. In a data science project, it's good even if you're great.
So you have to do a lot of practice on being concise, because it's usually if it's about a page is really all you have room for, right? Because you want to catch them with the science. You want to make sure all of that is there. And that's why I emphasize you have to think about it as you're doing your program plan, because then they'll have a sense of it throughout the proposal. So you don't have to be as specific in there, because you're gonna be giving them hints throughout the proposal about those broader impacts. And then really what all you're doing is now making it more explicit and summarizing in some cases, depending on how you introduced it earlier on. And then finally, the evaluation. 5 minutes. All right. You want to collect some kind of data on efficacy, whether or not you did make an impact, right? Again, depending on whether this is a science-based or not, like in education-based proposals, that's going to be the proposal, right? But if it's a science-based where that's only part of what you're doing, then you want to make sure you do plan for collecting evidence of the broader impact. And so you come up with a plan, which I'll show you some of the components of it in a minute. If you need help, STEM Corps can help, right? STEM Corps can help. So you want to have in-depth detail. The in-depth detail is not necessary, right? But again, make sure you have it in your plan, your project plan. I'm collecting this data here. I'm collecting this data here.
So my background is more with like the workforce development and education side of some of the NSF programs. For a science-centered proposal, is it normal to still have to go after like an external evaluator
Yeah.
for this section? So you're
You're
still going
always-
to be looking to partner with someone
Yes.
that's okay.
But the research service these days has that kind of a help resource that to get your proposal evaluated by an outside TDU guy.
Yeah, but make sure it's a good one. They have to be very specific about what they're going to do, right? And they should be the ones that are generating this text for you.
Okay, so I think that's a different thought than what he just mentioned. So you're saying the overall proposal could be evaluated by people associated with the Office of Research Services, but that's not what he asked. He said, do we identify someone specific who is assessing the overall impact of the broader impact plan? In other words, do you hire a consultant who does assessments?
Oh, as part of the.
As part of your plan, and she answered, and I agree, yes. You identify a professional who evaluates the and can assess the effectiveness, the impact of the.
Whether you're having a measurable impact.
And keep that in mind when you're developing your budget, because some of those folks are.
Yes, that's the thing. So it adds to the budget, NSF doesn't have money.
Well, but if all they're doing is doing the broader impacts, it shouldn't be. Yeah. Now, if they're evaluating everything, that's when it starts to get tough.
So STEM Corps can suggest what would be the decent budget, which is viable by the, because you people are doing this on a daily basis.
Yes, we can help.
But somebody in your STEM Corps can say, okay, $30 per hour is reasonable, don't put $300. Such kind of a ballpark.
I think it probably meant, what, $10,000 and $100,000.
But that's for like overall evaluation. The broader impacts, it really depends on the scale of what you're saying, what your impact is gonna be, right?
So the overall evaluation is 10% of the total.
Overall evaluation, that's above just the broader impacts. The overall event usually is about 10%, so it's gonna be a percentage of that for this piece.
So roughly 3 to 5%.
But yes, STEM Core has people who specialize in assessments, so you can identify them that way.
Here's a couple of examples of what you might say in this broader impact statement, because it's just a page, right? I'll give you a minute to read those. So this would be appropriate if in your project plan you have laid out at what points the data is going to be collected, right? Otherwise, you need to be a little bit more specific. You're almost done. Okay. So here's a checklist that you want to use when developing your broader impact statement. Make sure you have either goals, aims, or objectives. You don't have to have all three, but you want to start with that because you want to bring in the science that you're doing, right? And what you want to accomplish with that, what broader impact you want to do. Then incorporate your rationale, who you're going to collaborate to make sure that the activities you lay out are going to happen and have an impact. Then activities with a time frame, and then finally something about the evaluation. Okay, so hopefully you have a better idea about how to write convincing broader impact statements and have some idea at least where to go when trying to specify a plan for broader impact. Thank you all.